Here's how to make a contour profile toolpath in NX. A contour profile toolpath is a multi-axis wall profiling toolpath or a swarf milling toolpath. It can be used in a 4 or 5 axis simultaneous function and does not have to be normal to the z-axis of your part origin. It can be on any angle on the part and can create any form of tapered feature. It can even be utilized in a 3-axis motion if you'd like to do so. We're going to create an operation, go to the mill multi-axis type, and select contour profile. We'll go ahead and say OK there, and the first thing that we're going to do is specify our floor. For this example, we're going to cut around this square here. I'm going to select my floor and say OK. I'm then going to specify my walls. Typically, I like to include the corner radius in the wall feature. So I'm going to specify these walls by just single left click and selecting them. And there's my 4 walls. I can then say OK. And then my axis vector is going to be inferred. I'm going to come from this direction here, from the side. That is essentially the generic angle that you want the toolpath to come in on. We'll say OK there. Now, as we scroll down, you can see there is their check geometry where you can leave stock to your check if you wish. You can also leave stock on the wall or floor. In this instance, we're just going to do a no stock to leave finish pass on this square here. So now this toolpath is created. I can say OK, and I'm going to generate it. Once it's generated, you can see that this is the motion we have here. I'll verify this, and then we'll get into some of the more fine details of the contour profile toolpath, or some of the more advanced functions of the toolpath if you need some more control. Here we'll replay our toolpath, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit play, and you'll be able to see how the cutter moves and twists around this tapered square here and then retracts out. So that would be a 5-axis simultaneous motion to cut those angled walls. So going back into the toolpath, we can get into some of the higher functions. There are multiple ways to manipulate and use this toolpath. One tip and trick, you do not necessarily have to select your walls. If you have a very clean part model and your floor is selected, many times in the specify walls section, you can use this nifty little pre-select button. By selecting that, it will auto-select walls that touch that floor. If we do so, we can say OK, and we can go ahead and quickly just generate this toolpath to see the output it gives us. Here you can see that it has the same internal toolpath going around our tapered feature, but since it pre-selected the outer walls of the pocket as well, since they contact that floor, it did 2 passes, one around this tapered square and then one on the inside walls. I'm going to go ahead and change this back to just doing this internal square. I'm going to generate this really quickly, so that's what's the last thing in its memory. Now we're back to our single pass. If we go into our cutting parameters, there's going to be a couple things here that we can do. You can add multiple side passes to these toolpaths, or you can add multiple depths. When you turn these on, it gives you the options for how much stock is on the side and what increment you want to step over. Same for depths. Here is how deep you want to go, and this is the increment you want to go in your depth or your depth of cut. You can change from climb to conventional if you wish, but some of the high-level features here are going to be looking at this tool axis. Sometimes you can manipulate the tool and how it looks at the geometry that you selected for your wall and floor based on these 3 criteria. You can use automatic to let it decide what it wants to do on its own. You can say align to edges where here in this image, you can see that it's aligning to the edges of the wall features. Or you can do swarf, where it chops up the wall and analyzes it based on the increment of angle you give it in a different area here in NX that I'll show you. Jumping forward, there is a start and end option here. If your toolpath is coming in at an undesirable angle or moving in an undesirable way, you can have a little bit more control of how it moves by using these options. Here you can choose a user-defined start point if you wish as a reference. In our example here, you can see this is leading in and out in the center of this wall. If I select a reference point of this corner here and we regenerate this toolpath, you'll be able to see that it moves the start point to that corner. Now the end point is still in the center because we did not define an end point. You can also add extends to the start and end of the cut if you wanted an additional overlap. Just a side note, with a contour profile toolpath or any swarf milling, if you start and end at the same point on a wall, it's very common to get a dwell line in that wall. Using the extend distance on your start and end of only even 50 thousandths of an inch can allow the cutter to overlap the start and end motion and give you a more clean wall or a wall without a dwell line. If the angle is undesirable that it's entering on, you can use this tool axis here. You can select guided, and then you can give it a start and end vector that you want it to enter in on. Sometimes the tool may come in at an absolutely crazy angle for what you're cutting and you don't even understand how NX interpreted it that way, but by choosing a start point and using this tool axis vector here for your start of cut and end of cut, this will give you the control to determine how NX looks at the start and end of the toolpath. Here you can use collision checking to avoid a tool holder. And then as we continue down, there is this max angle change. A little bit ago I mentioned that by changing the tool axis here to swarf, you can see that in this image, in that radius feature, it has those 5 red lines. Those red lines are the increment that this max tool angle here is entered. So if I changed this toolpath, for example, to a swarf, and I changed this to a 0.1 from 180, and we generate this, let me undo these here for simplicity, and generate, you'll see a bunch of red lines appear on the walls of this model as it generates. When it does that, it's defining and looking at that model in those 100 thousandths of an inch steps or increments, and then it makes the motion a little bit more clean. But, so you know, as a reference, by doing this and dropping this down, it will make it look at it finer, but it will also add significantly more lines to the toolpath when post-processing, since it broke the toolpath up into 100 thou increments instead of large increments like it was set to before. That is pretty much all of the options in here that I ever change, but Contour Profile is a great toolpath for multi-axis finishing, and it gives you a lot of control and functionality and ways to manipulate it to get the desired end result.